Good evening. On behalf of the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service and the Lecture in Fine Arts series at UWMC, I welcome you to tonight's event, Trainscape's Art as Play That Builds Community, a panel presentation on an art service learning project that features the romance of trains. I'm Brett Barker, Assistant Professor of History here at UWMC and tonight's panel moderator. And I want to thank you for your interest and support of the Institute's 2009-2010 programming series, which was made possible by generous support from the Wisconsin Humanities Council, the UW Colleges, UW Extension, and other donors, and also for your interest in and support of the Lecture in Fine Arts series, which is funded by the Segregated University Fees Allocations Committee. I'd also like to invite you to the next Building Communities event. It'll be held on Thursday, February 4th, 2010, and it is entitled, The Stewardship of Eaters and Providers, How Sustainable Agriculture Builds Community. Tonight's event would not be possible without the contribution of WIP's staff and interns, committee members, and WIP's fellow, Assistant Professor of Art Diana Buddy, Associate Professor of Art Diana Buddy, sorry. Professor Buddy's commitment to not only her discipline, department, and students, but also her vision of community engagement and service learning in the arts has been a critical component in this project's success. Please plan to join us after the panel for the exhibit's opening reception in the Arnsbrock Room in South Hall, where you will be able to visit with panelists and join us for light hors d'oeuvres. To get there, just proceed out this door, go down the steps, continue around for a while, and if you end up standing in Garfield Avenue, you've gone too far. All right. So let me begin tonight by introducing the panelists who have joined us this evening. First of all, I'd like to introduce Tommy Roof, who is the founder and executive director of Happen, Inc., a nonprofit arts organization in Cincinnati that allows children and adults the opportunity to grow and explore the ways of art together. Tommy Roof has a Master's of Fine Arts degree in painting and has worked for commercial design companies as both a designer and a production artist. In 1995 to 1998, before devoting his life's work to the community building mission of Happen, Inc., he was the co-founder, art director, and copywriter for Barefoot Advertising in Cincinnati. Ralph Wavelets is a retired teacher from the Merrill Schools, where he worked for 33 years. He is also a longtime member of the Wisconsin Valley Model Railroad Club and has an HO Model Railroad layout that is, in my opinion, a masterpiece. Finally, Diana Buddy is Associate Professor of Art at UW Marathon County. Beyond her own work, Diana has a long history at UWMC of creating multidimensional art residencies, most of which include some aspect of service learning. This project involved her working with fourth graders in the Wausau schools, Merrill Area Head Start, and the Wisconsin Valley Model Railroad Club, coordinating UWMC art student service learning and hosting Tommy Roof's residence. So without further ado, let's begin, and our first speaker tonight will be Tommy Roof.
I want to thank everybody for a wonderful residency here. This is our second time coming back up to Wisconsin. But I want to explain a little bit. I know that I've talked to many of you already in some of the classes, but I see some new faces, so I want to be able to explain just a few minutes about what Happen actually is. Happen is a nonprofit agency that brings together parents and children through creative exercises. So we have tons of different activities that the whole family can really experience what, family bonding and what art can really do as far as bringing people together, learning together, and experiencing a wonderful thing that art can bring is a lifetime of memories. We have all kinds of different programs with Happen. Before I go any further, we always like to do the Happen Cheer. Raise your hand if you know the Happen Cheer. A few people already do. All right, I'm going to teach everybody the Happen Cheer, and it goes like this. So we're all going to count to 3. You can say it, you can count with me. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Then I want you to say, "You can make it happen." Will you say that with me? You can make it happen. And then we're going to clap 3 times. Then I want everybody, including all the kids and adults, I want you to say, "Just make it through college." Will you say that with me? Just make it through college. Okay. This time, as loud as you can, we're going to put all that together, all right? And we're going to do the happen cheer. Like I say, we do this before every happen activity. So take a big breath with me. 1, 2, 3. You can make it happen. Just. Very nice. Give yourselves a big round of applause, please. And that cheer is not just because we're speaking at a university. It's because when I was small, that's exactly what I heard from my mother. My mother said, you know, you can make it happen. You can do anything. Just keep your mind set. You can keep going. And as I got into high school, I was not the child to stay in school. I was probably more meant to be on the path of dropping out of high school than I was to stay in. But she kept saying, just make it through college. Get your education. So when I had an opportunity to start happen, I thought, you know what? I'm going to take those words of wisdom and put them together, and we're going to do the happen cheer before every activity. And I'm proud to say that we just turned 10. Happen just celebrated its 10th anniversary, and now a little over 13,000 kids a year will say that cheer. So we now have 8 different programs. Well, I'm going to share a couple of them with you. But one of them is called Let's Play with Clay. So it's our ceramics program, which is one of our biggest programs now. We started about 6 or 7 years ago. I don't know if you've ever made a pinch pot or a coil pot, or maybe you have some from your kids, or maybe some from your own childhood. And people say, okay, well, ceramics is so important because it's form and function, or that's why people are so interested in it. But I think that it's the function of being able to accomplish something that you can be proud of. It doesn't matter to me the function, whether it can hold water or dirt or pennies or paper clips, right? It's that sense that you're able to accomplish something. When a kid takes home a piece that they've made and they put it on the shelf, it's not only a memory that lasts a lifetime, but it's something that they can be totally proud of. We're very proud about this program. We are now firing about 2 kilns a week. Again, it's one of our biggest programs, and we have parents that come to our Happen Spaces and actually say, we have cabinets filled with Happenware, which is all the ceramics that they've made through our programs. Another one of our programs is called Happens Toy Lab. It's where you can come in and make your own toys out of recycled toy parts. So we have people just like you that donate their old and broken toys, and then we cut them into pieces, sort them and clean them, and put them into a wacky laboratory where kids can come in and pick out 7 parts, and then we have professors that drill and fill and put them together so that you can leave with your own creation. You have to name them, give them special powers, and then every toy goes onto our website. We call it activating the toys. There's over 7,000 toys on the website today. But more importantly, kids also learn that it's just not, well, plastic or paper or aluminum that gets discarded or that we should recycle. Everything gets discarded, including their own toys. And so in this case, when you recycle, you can bring in 25 pounds of old and broken toys and get a gift certificate for a free t-shirt, Toy Lab t-shirt, and a little sticker that says, I gave plastic today. But the biggest thing that you learn is that we all are blessed with the power of creativity, the ability to use your minds and imaginations to create something new. So we just don't call it recycling, we call it upcycling, taking something old and turning it into new again. So all of our programs are really based on 3 things: entertain, educate, and empower. We know that the first thing that has to happen, because we're also working with both parents and children, is that we need to be able to entertain on both levels. So we have all kinds of different characters. And I'll talk about a couple, like Eno, the 1-point perspective alien. He's from a whole nother perspective, and parents lose all perspective in that class. We also have the junk man, who teaches how you can actually draw with found objects. Cowboy Value, he's half light value, half dark value, and teaches the grayscale. And in fact, I'd like Russell Irick to stand up. Go ahead and stand up. You give him a big round of applause, actually. Russell's been with us through this residency and is one of our characters, and actually has played all of our characters. We have over 27 different characters that are fully developed. And Russell, you might have seen him today around the campus dressed as the conductor. And he has been a part of this program from the very, very beginning. So once we have everyone's attention and having fun through entertainment, then we can educate. And that's where we can bring together parents and children, or in this case, mentors and children. We have a mentoring program called LACITA. It stands for Life-Changing Experiences Through Art. We really feel like once they're entertained on both levels, an adult and a child, then we can not only just teach an art skill, but we can also teach a life lesson too at the same time. And then the biggest part is empowerment. Well, this is a great program for empowerment. It's called Lights, Camera, Learning in Action. So every summer on a Tuesday afternoon, we work with a company called Project Connect. Project Connect serves homeless children in Cincinnati. So they bring all these kids from 8 different shelters to one school, and they feed them. In some cases, they have to clothe them. And they also provide educational components throughout the day. We are one of those educational components. And we developed a program where kids come together and they write, direct, and produce their own film. It's a wonderful experience for not just the kids, but also the community, because when they arrive at our facility, I go out and I network. I talk to different companies and ask them to come together and meet these kids actually right on the street. Because when that bus pulls up and those kids come off the bus, we have at least 40 adults from different businesses cheering them on, getting their autographs, they're holding their pictures up, and these kids are treated like stars from the time they come off the bus to the time they leave again. And they actually do write, direct, and produce their own film, and then it premieres at the, well, this year premiered at the Cincinnati Museum Center, along with all the kids got 4 limos pulled up, and they all got limo rides back to Project Connect. So community is so important in all the aspects of happen, and it's very important as far as that portion called empowerment. And it not only empowers the kids, but it also empowers the adults to be able to be involved and have an opportunity to change a life. And we define community as, it's just not where you live, but it's how you live with other people. When we ask kids, what is community? What's it mean? Mainly they say, well, it's my house, it's, I don't know, my playground, maybe their school. But when we start to really investigate and we really start to talk to them, all of a sudden we really learn together that it is a much larger area than just where they live. It's all the people that they connect with. Community, it's not just where you live, but it's how you live with other people. And when I was asked to be involved in this, well, project, and you know what, I'm not going to call it a project anymore. It's definitely a production. I was amazed by all the different levels of how Diana had imagined to be able to bring together the community. It happened over the last 10 years. We've worked with different segments of the community as far as a Head Start program and maybe college students, or the businesses that cheer on the kids that are in elementary school. I've not seen a program or been a part of a program and had an opportunity to work with so many different levels, so many different areas of the community in one project. I know Diana's going to explain a little bit more about the whole process, but I was amazed that we have now worked from 3-year-olds all the way up through, I know the club sitting out there, probably in the 50s and 60s range. That's amazing age. You're going up a little higher even. Okay, I was being nice. But it's amazing to see all the different levels. So through this whole process, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about it, we've had college students from this university work with elementary school teachers and also students to develop. There's over 60 cars that you're going to see today, train cars. It's unbelievable. We also have college students working with Head Start, 3 to 5-year-olds, on learning their names and also graffiti. The kids actually went back, the university kids went back and created their names through graffiti, and then we went back to Head Start and they painted it, worked on the project together. And today, it was amazing because I got to watch the end result of the elementary school kids came through, and then the Head Start kids came through, and this little boy, Damien, I'm never going to forget it because we were looking for his name, and his face just lit up. And he was like, there I am. There I am, in a gallery space on the wall that somebody else had worked with him, another student had worked with him on creating. A very special moment, and I know that it's a moment that these kids are going to remember, and not only just the kids, but the college students and the adults that are involved too. That sense of community that goes so many different levels is something that really, it attracted us here. And I tell you, so many people came up and said, oh, you did a great job, you did a great job. I want to explain, this production, not just a project, a production, went on for several months. And I had an opportunity to be a part of just a small part of it. We were here maybe 6 days in total. But this production has been going on for several months. And you know, we always say we're kind of like the favorite uncle that comes in and takes you to a ball game and gives you a shiny new dollar and then leaves, and the parent actually has to deal with the everyday production of life. And that's kind of how I feel with Happen, is that we've come in and we've been able to be a part of all the fun and all the activities. But the work that's been behind it has been incredible. And I want to give a big applause to Diana and Jean for all the work that they've done. And so when we first started this process, I brought up the word sustainability. Like, if all this work is going to go into it, how is it going to last? How is it going to be repeated? And like a lot of projects I work on, it kind of gets pushed aside because you just dig right in and you start going at it and you just want to be able to produce it. But it has been on my mind as far as what's going to happen next. And I got to say that 2 weeks ago I was invited to a conference in Cincinnati. It was all about building the community through asset building. And it was a wonderful conference, and people were coming in from all over the United States to break into groups and talk about how they can build their community. And I was so excited about what I'd just been a part of, which was the first part of this production. I just kind of broke into my round group, and they were all different neighborhoods in the southwest Ohio area. And I said, you know what, you're not going to believe what I was just a part of. I said, you know, they did this big production where they went out to different schools and Head Starts, and this is in Wisconsin, where, you know, we were driving 30 minutes to one school and 30 minutes to another school, and then coming back here and people coming together. And this woman across the table from me said, you know, Tommy, you have every one of those elements within a 5-mile area of your location. You have a Head Start program, you have a college, an elementary school, and even a high school within that area. There is no reason why this program cannot be developed in our neighborhood. And the enthusiasm about this program was contagious. It went from our circle to another circle to another circle. The sustainability is the enthusiasm behind the production. And I guarantee we're going to see this program duplicated in other areas, and I'm hopefully in our neighborhood in Cincinnati. So I thank you so much for allowing us to be a part of it. It's been a real blessing, and I'm excited for you to actually see the show and see the end result. But realize that also the process is the most important thing. Knowing that the kids have created this, but also there's so many different levels of caring, that when an elder, an older student, a mom, a dad, a mentor, a person from the community can lead a child through learning, we are putting them on the path for success. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tommy. Next up, Ralph Wavelets. We're going to take just a minute for some technological issues, but we'll be going in just a second.
I'm hoping something comes up on the screen pretty soon. Does this have to be turned on or anything?
No,
It's
it'll be
working.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, there we are.
Okay.
I feel a little intimidated here in front of this audience, which contains an awful lot of highly skilled model railroaders, and I've been asked to talk about model railroading. I started model railroading in 1949. Since then, I've probably forgotten half of all I ever learned in that period of time, and the other half is outdated. So I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage. But I guess there are a few things that we might address here. First of all, I see model railroading as a genuine hobby or avocation. People claim all kinds of interests as being a hobby, like going to movies or whatever. I think for something to truly be a hobby, it has to involve some learning, maybe a lot of learning, and developing skills, developing information, learning about something, and developing skills to practice that hobby or avocation. In pursuing model railroading, there are quite a variety of learnings and skills that can be involved. For example, a good model railroader, if he is serious about model railroading, he wants to learn about the real thing. So learning to use a camera is a pretty important skill. Go out and take pictures of railroads. Having research material is highly desirable. Acquire your own, or find it in the library or through interlibrary loan, or of course the internet is a good source of a lot of information. I like having my own collection of books, and it's nice to be able to pick up a book when I want to read about some aspect of model railroading and just refresh my memory about something. The skills we have to learn are very varied. Basic carpentry is a pretty important part of it, and this happens to be a scene of our model railroad in the basement of the Yawkey House. Wisconsin Valley Model Railroad Club is building quite a large and extensive railroad there, a little bit more railroad than most of us would ever put in our own homes. But there we see Jim Garrity doing some carpentry work, and as you can see, there's a lot of lumber going into that production. But not only do we work with big things like carpenter tools, but we have to develop the skills of working with small tools too, because model railroading is mostly working with little stuff, miniatures of railroads in various sizes, but still we acquire tools, and we acquire skills of using a variety of tools like files and soldering tools and adhesives and pliers of various kinds. And there's one very unique tool here which I've never known of anybody besides myself to have one of those. If you're interested, I'll tell you about it later. It's a very special, very valuable tool and has an unusual name. In addition to the tools we have to learn, let's go about railroads. I'm pushing the wrong button, I guess. There we go. Look at railroads. See what they look like and what they do. Well, this is a page from a Milwaukee Road timetable. It happens to be the Valley Line, the railroad line that comes up through Wausau. And this is of interest if you want to know what a railroad did in a particular location. This is the movement of the trains. One of the important things, in my view, about a hobby is that it's unimportant. One can get deeply engrossed in a hobby, in one's model railroad, and sometimes struggle mightily with problems, with things that aren't working out quite right, or trying to decide how to get a particular effect or get something to work properly. But at the end of the day, the activity on the model railroad doesn't have anything to do with one's livelihood. You can walk away from it, forget it, put it aside, doesn't make any difference. If it's really a hobby, it should be unimportant in that sense, even though we get very absorbed in it and may devote a lot of time and energy to it. The idea of a model railroad is to create an accurate rendering in miniature of some aspect of railroads. Railroads are very complicated systems, and model railroads are very complicated, and model railroading has a great amount of diversity in it. If you get a half a dozen model railroaders together, they'll have a half a dozen different ideas about what they think their railroad, if they're building one, should look like, where it should be, what it should do, and so on. In building our Wisconsin Valley Railroad, we think about real railroads and what real railroads in this area would be like. We work with blueprints of actual railroad locations or equipment. With the idea that we're going to create a believable model scene, as something that looks like a railroad that people looking at will recognize as railroad. In this scene, we have a railroad structure here, and I guess I can give a little insight into what a model railroader might do if he wants a structure on his railroad. I wanted this structure on my railroad. It's not available commercially. I couldn't buy one like that. Nobody makes a kit for it. I couldn't build one from a kit. So and this goes back a few years, I went to Rhinelander, photographed the coal servicing facility that still stood there on the Sioux line, measured some of the timbers, took the dimensions of them, made some sketches of some of it, went back home, spent quite a long time drawing plans of the structure from the information I gathered by looking at it and photographing it. Eventually had a plan that I thought seemed right, the proportions seemed right, then acquired the materials. All these sticks you see are of different sizes and are accurately reproduced miniatures of the actual timbers that supported that structure. Some of these were 12 by 12 inch timbers, some 12 by 16, there's some 2 by 10, 2 by 12 boards bracing it and so on. And all of those timbers are essentially pretty accurate reproductions of what the original structure looked like. One can acquire a locomotive. In this case, it came as a shiny brass object, which needed a few modifications in some of the details because as it came, it wasn't quite accurate, and there were a mistake or two that had to be corrected in order to make it work properly, but it had to be painted. and was painted initially to look like a shiny new locomotive, but most locomotives don't look like that very long, so an attempt was made to add a patina of dust and a little grime and a little weathering to make it look a little bit more like a machine that had actually been in service. And this is the way we want most of our railroads, our model railroads, to look like a working railroad. If you're going to build a model railroad, there are a lot of decisions that have to be made. The first one is, what scale are you going to build in? If you like big stuff, this car on the bottom is in a proportion of approximately 20 to 1. In other words, the real thing is 20 times the size of the model. That size is quite large. Not many people build a railroad that size, in that scale, in their basement. It is frequently used for outdoor railroads, garden railroads. There are a few of those in the Wausau area, or at least one or two. The refrigerator car here, lettered for the Page Milk Company in Merrill, is O scale. Fairly popular scale, not as popular as it used to be perhaps. This is the scale that runs on the same gauge track as the Lionel toy train sets, but the cars are accurately modeled to scale, and they're not, well, they're built quite differently than the toy train car, which is built to be tossed about a bit and handled roughly, built to endure the abuses that a child will inflict upon it. We tried to treat our equipment a little more gently on our railroad. This one is an HO scale car in a ratio of 1 to 87. HO roughly means half O, so it's roughly half the size of this car, but it's actually just a little bit bigger than half of HO. This is the scale that we're using on the club railroad. It's the scale of my own railroad. Most of the people I know that are model railroaders are HO scalers, with the exception of Professor Parker, who I believe is an N scaler. He likes the little stuff. This is a scale of 1 to 160 approximately. This has the advantage for a home railroad of allowing you to get a lot of railroad in a relatively small space. HO is pretty good that way and has the advantage of being able to reproduce fairly accurately and in proportion the handrails, the brake piping, the brake staff, the rods and piping and so on that would be on the real locomotive. In HO scale, the piping underneath and the brake staff at the end, well, in the real thing, they're about 1 inch in diameter, and in HO that comes out to about 12 thousandths of an inch in diameter, or about half the diameter of an ordinary stick pin. In N scale, it's pretty hard to reproduce the fine detail. I guess if you like the detail, and want a lot of detail on your models, you go for HO or O scale. Or if you have a basement the size of this room, then you can go for the big stuff. Another way of looking at those cars, a little different sense of how the sizes relate to one another. Another decision you have to make about building a model railroad is time placement. If you want a railroad that looks plausible, you don't place 1885 wood-burning, balloon-stacked steam locomotive next to a modern Amtrak highly streamlined diesel train. They don't belong together. They don't look believable together. So you pick a time period. In this case, if you can see the road vehicles fairly well here, you might be able to tell that this would be placed in about the mid-50s. The building is a fairly modern, kind of an Art Deco style building. And the modeler here intends this to be about 1955. This model railroad is placed in an earlier period, which would be fairly obvious from a rather early style for the passenger car. It's a wooden car. You can't see it, but it has truss rods underneath, open observation platform on the end, tends to date it. And of course the road vehicles here, which vary from the mid-30s to about the mid-20s. And this railroad is placed in about 1938. And you have to decide on a location. If you're going to place your railroad in the mountains of Colorado, it's going to look different from if it's on the Great Plains or in a New England seacoast setting. The railroads do different things in different locations. They look different, and certainly the setting looks entirely different. So if you're going to put some scenery on your railroad, that's going to have to vary considerably with the location of the railroad. Railroads can vary by what they do. There are railroads that are or were single commodity railroads, like a logging railroad. It existed primarily to move cut logs from the forest where they're harvested to the sawmill. Or a railroad might exist to move iron from a mine to the docks where it's shipped across the Great Lakes to a steel mill. Or a single commodity railroad might be devoted strictly to moving people. This is the Chicago North Shore and Milwaukee line, unfortunately no longer in existence. Or there are railroads which are kind of general purpose railroads, or were. This is the Great Northern a few years ago, and we see a passenger train. This is the train that ran between Minneapolis and Duluth. There's a switch engine over here and extensive yards filled with freight cars. This is kind of the milling district of Minneapolis, again, a few years ago. The rationale for your railroad depends upon whether you are going to create a fictitious railroad. Many people create totally fictitious railroads with totally imaginary settings. Some people model what they imagine could have been in a branch of an actual railroad. They'll say, well, I'm going to create a branch for the Great Northern Railroad or the Chicago Northwestern Railroad, and we'll model equipment of that railroad, but in a location in which it never existed. One of the finest model railroads I've ever seen was one that was a model of an actual segment of an actual railroad, where someone modeled part of the Sioux line that ran between Wapaka and Stevens Point, and modeled in great detail buildings and track arrangements in Wapaka and also at Stevens Point, with a lot of selective compression between, of course, given the limitations of a basement. But it was very excellently done model railroad. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore. Professor Buddy had asked me to talk about model railroading as an art form, and I gave that a lot of thought, not knowing a great deal about art, and it occurred to me I didn't exactly know how to define art, and I guess I couldn't talk about model railroading as an art unless I knew what it was, and did a little reading and some thinking about it, and came up with two concepts about art. And we can argue about this later, perhaps, if necessary. But it seemed to me that, first of all, an artist has to be an observer and has to observe the real world. Whether or not you're going to recreate it in photographic realism, you still have to look at it and decide how you're going to depart from that realism if you're not going to adhere strictly to reproducing something totally realistically. As model railroaders, mostly we want to reproduce things with great precision and accuracy and adherence to what the actual thing really looked like. But other forms of art, that may not be necessarily true. The other aspect that I found was creative imagination. And I think any artist probably employs a lot of creative imagination in creating his art, and this is certainly true of model railroads as an art form. A lot of creative imagination is involved in creating a model railroad. This is a representative car on a totally imaginative, totally fictitious railroad. The Herald was designed to suggest a style of lettering and style for the emblem that would have suggested early part of well, around the turn of the century, a century ago, between the 18th and or 19th and 20th centuries. In building the Wisconsin Valley Railroad over in the basement of the Yawkey House, we had to start by looking at the space that we were going to occupy, which was totally changed from what it had been previously when they did the remodeling of the house. Here we're working on getting the space ready and beginning to do some of the bench work, which led to creating a plan for the railroad. First we examine the space, then we create a railroad which combines our ideas about what we want the railroad to do, how we want to utilize the space, what our considerations are for visitors that are going to come into the space, where the railroad is to go, how much railroad we want to get into that space. We agonized over this for quite a while, and the discussions, while not acrimonious, were not entirely harmonious either, as we worked through coming to a final conclusion as to what our plan was going to be for the railroad. And as we built, there were continual rethinkings of what we were accomplishing, and always underlying it a great deal of attention to accurately and very carefully constructing the foundation for the railroad, because we wanted it to run reliably, and so building the underlying benchwork was extremely important. These gentlemen are doing some of the electrical work, also a fundamental basis for a model railroad to work successfully. And here we're considering and reconsidering how we want to treat a particular area. And occasionally we found that work that was done had to be redone as we rethought how we were going to use a particular space. Time to stop. I'm told to stop. Okay.
Sorry.
Well, ultimately, we get to making it begin to look believable as a real setting for a railroad. We've begun to do some scenery on the railroad, and this is, we don't have much done, but I think it gives the impression of northern Wisconsin, which is what our objective was, and so far.
All right, thank you, Ralph. I was asked tonight to sort of talk about some of the big themes. I am a professor of history here, and I could talk certainly about the role that railroads played in the development of communities, the ways in which for a long time the railroad depot was really the entree to any community. And many people know that indeed, living in a place like Wausau, certainly, you know that our depot was in fact iconic for a very long time in the United States. And so in many ways, trains have helped to build community. But as Ralph revealed a bit earlier, it's also true that I myself am a model railroader, and so I wanted to think about the big theme of the WIP's programming for this year, that is building community. And I want to sort of build on some of the ideas that I think that Tommy so brilliantly sort of introduced earlier and kind of bring together some of what we've talked about this evening. You know, the concept of community ties all this together in several ways. In many ways, we are a society that is formed by a myriad of smaller communities. And those communities are as often defined by interest as by geography. The arts community is one of the gems of this community, which of course includes projects like this, the Performing Arts Block, the CVA, Leaky Woodson, UWMC's own Lecture in Fine Arts series, and I could go on and on. It is really, in a way, part of the social glue that ties the Wausau area together. And I think Tommy has shown how powerfully this glue can hold a community together and the ways in which something like the arts community can be such an important factor in maintaining a sense of community in any place. But the arts community is in some ways but one example of this social glue. Many collectors and hobbyists also have vibrant communities of which they are a part. Through model railroading, I've come to know wonderful people, including Ralph and Tom Berg and others, people who I would simply probably would never have met otherwise. Many of you doubtless share a passion for something beyond your job and family, be it collecting stamps, NASCAR models, or Beanie Babies. I think people still collect Beanie Babies. Or whether it be hobbies and activities like quilting, curling, or deer hunting. I felt I had to put that one in given the time of year that it is, right? And we are in Wisconsin. And I think that Ralph has shown the ways in which, whatever that particular interest or hobby is, the way in which it truly can become a passion, something that drives us and gives meaning to our life, in his case, for many years, in many cases, for a lifetime. These activities can also bring people together from diverse backgrounds, occupations, and experiences. Again, people who might never have met in any other way. So in real and enduring ways, a larger community always benefits from having these numerous smaller communities tied by interest. But more than that, when two or more of these smaller communities interact, as indeed in this case, artists, model railroaders, and school children did in this project, I think we're all the better for it. Sociologists worry that Americans have become a nation with a weakened sense of community, that we are in fact bowling alone, according to the title of one such study. This need not be the case. We will always gather within our own smaller groups based on interest, and of course that only makes sense. But it seems to me that one of the challenges we face as we move into the 21st century is to reach beyond that worthwhile starting point, collecting based on interest, to move beyond that, to find ways that disparate groups within our society can share their passion, their energy, and their joy for some unique, quirky, and indeed magnificent obsession. For in the end, it is that sharing, those interactions, those connections that truly make us human. So I hope maybe that's part of the big picture. And finally, back to the project itself, I'd like to turn it over to Professor Buddy, who's going to talk a little bit about what was actually done in this project so we can get on and go see it. Thank you.
Well, being an artist, one of my favorite communities is the art community. And I'm always excited to try and share that community with others, because I think that the arts is a way to play again. And it's a way to be very affirmative in terms of everyone's potential for thinking differently, thinking up new ways of doing things. This image is by Carita Scott Kent, who was an art professor and who really engaged her students in playing first before they came up with their projects. So I wanted my students to re-engage with the idea of playing. And in order to do that, I thought it would be a good idea to partner up with that time in their life when they remember playing as a child. And so we visited Head Start, and here's one of my students, Matt, and he is partnering up with Samara at the Merrill Head Start. And he drew the name, and then she painted it, and then he went back and made it refined. And I think that what we find when we work with really young children is that they have this potential for seeing color and form in a new way. Like Samara, she just had a purple stroke and a yellow stroke and a red stroke, and that's all she wanted, a little bit of orange on the S. And all of that white space. And it made me, when she held that up, I had to take a picture because it made me rethink, you know, how I would do a painting. You know, so often we don't think differently. We need somebody to really let that loose, that creativity come alive again. So here are some students holding up their prized possessions. And again, it had their name on it, so of course they owned it right away. And it also showed that somebody else cared about who they were as an individual. And, you know, kids love to paint. And don't you remember getting messy and how wonderful that is? And so a lot of them turned brown after a while because they were so into mixing the paint. But that's a joy in itself. And then for my students to say, okay, now I have a brown painting, what am I going to do with this? And try to incorporate that neutral tone in their paintings was an interesting problem for them. So here is Tommy and Russ, and I have to say, they are the most organized artists I've ever known. They go over plans over and over and over. And they are just right on cue. It's amazing how smoothly the time goes. You know, all of these 3 to 5-year-olds coming in. It could have been utter chaos, but it wasn't. It ran just like a good locomotive. And they also, what happened was in the project is built a train car. It is O scale. And I learned so much about trains. And I know I'm a total novice. My father was into model railroading. and I never really understood what he was doing, but I now can kind of look back and admire and respect, you know, that hobby he had. So I learned about the different scales. We built an O scale train car. I sent it to Tommy and Happen Inc., and this is their rendition that they gave back to me. It was so wonderful to open the package, and this is what came out. And so this was their, you know, their example for the fourth graders. They took thousands and thousands of toys and drilled them and put plastic inserts in them so that when we went to the fourth graders, they could just insert them in the train cars and just have at it and decide, you know, I want this color here and that color there. So they did a lot of work before they got here. I also went to Pope's Hobbyland, which is the place to go. Not only for model trains, but for art supplies. They have been the supplier of my art students, along with the UWMC bookstore. But they have been great for many years, and with a little bit of an unorganized artist as myself, they've been super wonderful. And when I approached Dave Conrad at Pope's and told him about the project, he was interested in his very reserved way. And he helped me so much to learn. He figured out how to put the trucks, which are wheels, I learned, on the train cars. And we went and laid out the layout that you're going to see in the Arnsbrook room, in the basement of Pope's. And he helped me figure out how much track to buy. And he was just a great resource. So I have to thank him. There's his little train right above in Pope's. And I have to thank Jane, of course, because she deals with all of my anxiety, running out of trucks. You know, I guess we bought out the nation. Running out of the hardware, millimeter versus inches, oh my gosh. So there was a lot of things we had to overcome, but she was always there and very helpful at Pope's. And, you know, we had to build these things. So, you know, when Ralph was talking about basic construction, you know, I'm a painter. I know how to build a stretcher frame. I started to have to figure out how to build other things. And so I had to figure out how to build sawhorses. This is Professor Tom Fleming. I'm sure many of you recognize him. And so he was very helpful in helping me to do those things. And his 3D class were the ones who actually had the project of creating the trainscapes that the model railroad would pass through. So my initial idea was that they would all make a tunnel, and some of them did make a tunnel, but then they kind of strayed from that idea. And each student in the class came up with their own idea of what they wanted to do. They had a 4 by 4 foot sheet of MDF to work from. And then we connected them all together in the end. And, you know, Tom knows everything about everything, you know, in case you didn't know that. And this guy, I call him Little Tom. He was in the 3D class, and he helped me build the bridges between the 4 by 4 foot sections that the students were making. And I never asked him. He's not in a course. He's not going to get anything from me. But he stayed the whole time, and he was running the circular saw like, I don't know, like I move a paintbrush. So he was very helpful. His name is Randy. And another person who was really helpful on the project was Mary Tao. She's my art club president. And, you know, we went to 3 4th grade classes to do these trains, cars, where they embellished them how they wished. And so that turned out to be about 65 cars that we had to build. So each of my students had to build 3. And as most things, you know, students get busy or whatnot, and so we came up short. So she would stay with me and build cars. And I also have to thank my husband, who I don't have a picture of, but Chris, I mean, I do have a picture of him, but not in this. What if I do? But he was like the mastermind of building the cars. He could just whip them up, no problem, and figured out how to do the walls better and everything better. So he was very helpful as well. This is Doug Hostler. I know some of you must know him as well. He is also a model railroad club member. And he, once I bought the track, and Dave helped me with that, you know, he helped me lay it out in the Arnsbrook room so that it actually functioned. And he spent a couple days doing that. And, you know, he came down this afternoon when the locomotive wasn't running and said we had it on backwards. And so he's been a great help as well. And this is Justin Hubner, who he designed the LF&A brochure. The posters you see are derived from his designs, and he also designed the invitations, spending many nights looking at a Mac computer. And so I have to thank him. And this is Sam, another art student who is also helpful in creating more cars. So the cars we did with the fourth graders, the graffiti names we did with the Head Start students, and the 3D design students did the Trainscapes, and lastly, the painting students all went to visit a model railroad from the Wisconsin Valley Model Railroad Club. And you know, most of them 3 to 1 model railroad. And they interviewed the person and then created a painting based on the interview. And so those paintings are up as well. And so they came up with some interesting things. One has Sasquatch in it. You'll have to check for that one. And one is interesting. It has fish, train car fish, because the person also had a big goldfish tank. So sometimes people who are observing might not be observing exactly what you would think they are. But so their paintings are inspired by these club members. So that's the entire project, and I'm sure you want to go and see what the result is. So thanks to everyone who helped on the project. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Now for the main event. If you'll join the parade, we will proceed to the Arnsbrook and see the project. Thank you.